You are listening to Viewpoints from PlaceCloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
The Tower of London is home to some of the most well-known historical graffiti in the capital city, an extensive collection of early modern marks, with many of these located in the Beauchamp Tower. The Tower of London functioned as a state prison for a number of centuries, and visitors have been enthralled to learn about its history and the story of those kept there since it was first opened to the public. The Beauchamp Tower was built around 1281 by King Edward I, but its name was inspired by Thomas Beauchamp, Earl of Warwick, who was imprisoned in the tower in the 14th century after rebelling against King Richard II. Over centuries of use as a prison, the tower housed a number of high-ranking prisoners, including political and religious prisoners like Lady Jane Grey and her husband, Guildford Dudley. This former prison is believed to contain at least 300 graffiti inscriptions, which were created over 4 centuries by the imprisoned inhabitants to help alleviate their boredom during their confinement and to make sure they would be remembered. About 74 of these graffiti marks are believed to date to the 16th century. The Tower of London has been considered a tourist attraction since the Elizabethan period, and the crown jewels have been displayed there since the 17th century, though the tower's popularity increased significantly in the 19th century. A desire to see the graffiti in the Beauchamp Tower could be traced back to at least the mid-19th century, when there was a huge surge in visitors to the Tower of London in 1852, influenced by both the Great Exhibition in London in 1851 and the increased perception of a nationalised and British history where a greater sense of public ownership was applied to some historic buildings. During the Victorian age, the Tower of London was further transformed into a tourist attraction, reflecting an increasing desire among the middle classes to engage with the country's history and their ability to do this through greater leisure time. Meanwhile, associations with the tower moved away from how it had been perceived as a military garrison in the early 19th century, with novels and other contemporary works focusing on the tower, popularising it and leading many at the time to start viewing the tower as an important part of the national story, as well as a site of morbid fascination and what can now be called a form of dark tourism. Around 230,000 tourists are believed to have visited during this time, many of whom wanted to see the graffiti left by 16th and 17th century prisoners in the Beauchamp Tower. In fact, the internal partitions were even removed to make the site more accessible to the public and to expose the graffiti so that it could be viewed by visitors. Furthermore, a purpose-built ticket office was even added to the site in 1851. Interestingly, in 1912, Frank Baines, architect in charge of ancient monuments and historic buildings at the Office of Works, asked the Royal Mint for assistance in obtaining permanent records of the prisoner inscriptions in the tower by electrotyping process as a matter of great importance, as they were threatened in a state of powdery decay. The Royal Mint was using a newly installed electrotyping plant for the productions of post-stamp plates, but agreed to help, and moulds were taken from 268 inscriptions, taking care to ensure that no damage was done to the inscriptions or the building material. Almost a century later, in 2003, an exhibition was organised by Historic Royal Palaces at the Tower of London on the graffiti in the Beauchamp Tower, after it was recorded using the latest laser scanning techniques. Many of the graffiti in the Beauchamp Tower include prisoners' names, initials and monograms, a common sight in prison graffiti. The academic Professor Ruth Arnott has written that this type of graffiti, in contrast to heretical graffiti, held no danger, as it did not present a challenge to authorities, and they would only be viewed at the time by prisoners and the prison guards, though they were still probably quite significant to those that carved the marks. She has added that such graffiti are made by those that are dispossessed, as they have been ousted from their homes and positions of power, whilst the self-referential use of a name or initial intrinsically asserts a sense of human subjectivity and a defence against anonymity. Such marks often functioned as a way of leaving proof of one's existence, by leaving a mark that would last long after the individual themselves had gone, thus marking both their presence in history and signalling their imprisonment as an unjust act. Furthermore, leaving a piece of graffiti on the world around them may have functioned as a way of being able to redefine or reinterpret their tower imprisonment, at a time when they had had to forgo their normal freedoms and were often under threat of death. Examples of graffiti with names and initials in the tower include those created by some of the rebels involved in the Pilgrimage of Grace in 1536, including marks made by Adam Sedber, Lawrence Cook, Sir Ingram Percy, Sir William Bulmer, and Sir Ralph Bulmer, and Marmaduke Neville. The Pilgrimage of Grace is considered to be the most serious of all Tudor rebellions, and was a rising in the northern counties of England as a protest against the Reformation legislation of King Henry VIII. Resentment to his minister Thomas Cromwell, who was trying to increase government control in the north, and to the dissolution of the monasteries. Other pieces of graffiti which relate to the Pilgrimage of Grace include two inscriptions left by Father John Collins, who wrote, "Learn to flare God, I.C. 1538, as well as a biblical proverb which translates to, "Rebuke a wise man and he will love you." Father John Collins was later executed at Tyburn on the 9th of January 1539. Adam Sedber was executed on the 26th of May 1537, and Lawrence Cook on the 4th of August 1540, while Sir Ingram Percy, Sir William Bulmer, and Sir Ralph Bulmer were pardoned. Other notable marks left in the Beauchamp Tower include those made by Robert Dudley, later the Earl of Leicester, who was imprisoned there with his three brothers, John, Henry, and Ambrose, after they were condemned traitors for trying to put Lady Jane Grey on the English throne. Robert Dudley left an intricate design carved into the prison walls, depicting a large coat of arms of the Dudley family, the name John Duddle, and a plant for himself and each of his brothers, roses, oak leaves, honeysuckle, and carnations, known as gilliflowers. It also features the inscription, "Yow that these beasts do not well behold see, may deem with ease wherefore here made they be, with borders eke wherein are to be found, for brother's name who list to search the ground." Some have suggested that a few of the inscriptions may have been created by Lady Jane Grey herself, with the carved name Jane appearing a few times in the tower, though others have speculated that they may have been created much later. When Catherine of Aragon's chaplain, Thomas a Bell, published a treatise saying that it was unlawful for King Henry VIII to divorce his wife, and refused to change this position even though the king wanted to marry Anne Boleyn, Thomas a Bell was imprisoned in the Tower, and a mark still survives in the upper chamber from this time, showing a bell with an A on it and the name Thomas scratched in just above. The graffiti has been described by Arnott as the most creative example of the self-naming graffiti. Later, in 1540, Thomas a Bell was hung, drawn and quartered in Smithfield. Two marks left by a servant member of Parliament can also be seen in the Beauchamp Tower, left by Edward Smalley, who was a servant of a member of Parliament who neglected to pay a fine for assault and was imprisoned there as a result. A much more elaborate piece of graffiti that can be found in the Tower of London, in that of the Salt Tower, is a piece created by Hugh Draper, a Bristol innkeeper who was accused of sorcery and sent to the Tower in 1560. The graffiti piece is that of a zodiac wheel, with plans for the days, weeks and hours located on the right-hand side. Queen Elizabeth I also imprisoned high-profile figures and individuals in the Tower, who went on to leave graffiti marks. This included Philip Howard, the Earl of Arundel, who was sent there for 10 years when he was sentenced to death in 1589. As a Catholic peer, he was seen as a threat to national security by Protestant Queen Elizabeth. During his imprisonment, Arundel carved his name into the upper wall of the Tower, and also left an inscription in Latin on a chimney breast, which is translated to, "The more affliction we endure for Christ in this world, the more glory we shall get with Christ in the world to come." Various graffiti inscriptions have also been attributed to Arthur and Edmund Pole, two brothers who were accused of conspiring to place Mary Queen of Scots on the throne and were imprisoned in the Tower of London as traitors. Though Queen Elizabeth I had decided to spare their lives in the end, they still died whilst they were imprisoned in the Tower. As a princess, Elizabeth herself had been imprisoned in the Tower of London, as was her Italian tutor Giovanni Battista Castiglione, who carved a couple of graffiti marks into the Salt Tower during his imprisonment, which included a heart with an E in the middle. In the Martin Tower, located in the northeast corner of the Tower of London, visitors can see graffiti left by those who were imprisoned in the tower after the Gunpowder Plot in 1605, including those of Ambrose Rookwood, a key figure in the conspiracy who was captured not long after the plot failed. On the 31st of January 1606, Ambrose Rookwood was executed for treason for his involvement in the plot, but whilst he was imprisoned and awaiting his death, he left a reminder of his life and imprisonment in the form of graffiti on the tower within which he was kept in his final months.